we sat down with Donald Trump at the Mar-a-Lago Club in Palm Beach to talk in the aftermath of the terrorist attacks in Brussels. Amongst other matters, we asked him to clarify something he told the Washington Post editorial board earlier this week about whether he would ever consider using tactical nuclear weapons against the Islamic State.
I think I'd probably be very, very late compared to my opponents that are running. People don't realize, and I know a lot of people like to say he actually was sort of for the Iraq War. I was against the Iraq War. Right. When I did the one interview many months before it started, it was like, I don't know, this is the first time. And in all fairness, I've been a great businessman over the years. I was asked as a businessman. It didn't sound so good to me. Right. But by the time that started, and there's plenty of proof on it, I mean, there's plenty of articles from that time, or at least very early on, I was very much against the Iraq War. Hillary Clinton wanted to do it. Hillary Clinton would be such a bad president. She doesn't have the strength. She doesn't have the stamina to be president or to be a good president. People wanted to go into Iraq. I didn't. I'm supposed to be the one that are all saying, oh, he'd use. I would probably be the last to use it. But I have to say this.
You'd probably be the last to use nuclear weapons against ISIS. But you would rule in the possibility of using nuclear weapons against ISIS.
Well, I'm never going to rule anything out.
Right.
And I wouldn't want to say, even if I felt it wasn't going, I wouldn't want to tell you that.
Right.
Because at a minimum, I want them to think maybe we would use it. Okay.
Right.
It's the worst thing when we do these interviews with everybody, not me.
Yeah.
And you ask a question like that, and everybody comes clean and they're so honest. We need unpredictability. The enemy, we have enemies. ISIS is an enemy, and it's an enemy not wearing uniforms, so we don't even know who the enemy is. In the old days, we'd have Japan, or we'd have Germany, they'd have soldiers. Right. They'd be dressed, we'd be dressed, we know who we were fighting. Right. It was called a war. We don't know who these people are. The fact is, we need unpredictability, and when you ask a question like that, it's a very sad thing to have to answer it, because the enemy is watching, and I have a very good chance of winning. And I frankly don't want the enemy to know how I'm thinking.
Understood.
But with that being said, I don't rule out anything.
Right. Let me ask you, looking back then, rather than looking forward and maintaining unpredictability, have there been circumstances, provocations in the past, let's say 15 years, when you, if you had been president, would have considered using nuclear weapons? For instance, after 9/11, would you have considered using nuclear weapons against the Taliban?
No.
No. Why?
No. Well, first of all, we attacked the wrong country.
Right.
We went after Iraq. Iraq did not knock down the World Trade Center.
Right, well, that's why I asked about the Taliban.
I'm just saying, Iraq did no, because we could have taken out the Taliban without, if we really wanted to do it. We didn't need nuclear weapons. I would say definitely nuclear weapons are a last resort. That I will say. I understand the power of nuclear weapons. I had an uncle for many years at MIT, a brilliant man. He used to tell me 30 years ago about the power of weaponry, but the power of nuclear and other things. And it's so devastating. No, I would say, absolutely as a last resort.
You're talking more and thinking more
that
about...
That doesn't mean we shouldn't be prepared, and that doesn't mean our equipment shouldn't be prepared, and I'm not even sure it is prepared. I watched 60 Minutes from about a year ago, where they should have never put this on. The administration should have never allowed it. But they showed these nuclear weapons that are not in a state of preparedness. And I will tell you, I would never want to use them, but we have to be prepared, and they have to be absolutely perfect.
You're talking more and thinking more about national security than you ever have, obviously.
It's true.
What are the areas where you would like to learn more, where you think you need to know more to be president about national security?
I've had a good instinct for national security.
I'm not asking about your instincts, though.
No, but it is. It's all about instinct.
Well, but so there's no area where you think you need to know more about the Chinese leadership?
I want to know more about everything in every area, okay? I want to know more about everything in every little area, in every little corner. But I do think I have a very good instinct for this. I said take the oil 4 years ago. If you go back, take the oil, take the oil. We shouldn't have been in Iraq. But I said, now you're leaving. You've totally destabilized the Middle East. It's a total mess. Iran is going to take the oil because Iran is, people don't realize Iraq has the second largest oil reserves in the world, and really good oil. I said, take the oil. So now who has the oil? ISIS has the oil, and Iran is going to have all of the oil.
It's taken for granted for a long time that the United States and that the President of the United States are the leaders of the free world. Right? Would you, if you were President of the United States, would you think of yourself as the leader of the free world?
I would.
You would?
Yes. But that doesn't mean I'm going to spend trillions of dollars on nation building.
Right.
Because I think the days of nation building have proven to be over.
Do you think America is the most powerful country on earth right now?
I think that weapons are changing. And all of a sudden, the power of the weaponry is so incredible. Let me tell you, if we weren't talking about the power of weapons, I would have been out of the Middle East. I would have said, if you're going in, you made a mistake, get out immediately, come out. But you can't allow anybody to arm with the kind of weapons and the kind of power that can be produced today. That's the problem.
But you talked earlier about the notion that we're losing to ISIL, that they're making us look foolish and soft.
ISIS. Don't you say ISIS?
ISIL, Islamic
it's
State.
one thing with the president. He always says ISIL.
Whatever.
ISIL. Everyone else says ISIS. And it's almost like he does it to bother people, okay?
Well,
you understand.
I'm not doing it to bother you.
Okay, no, I know that. But you know what? But the president of the United States always says ISIL, and everyone else says ISIS, and I actually think he does it to bother people.
But when people say America's the most powerful country on earth, they're talking about economics, they're talking about military, they're talking about everything, right? So is America right now the most powerful country on earth, or is someone more powerful?
I would say people are catching up. I think China's catching up. I think Russia's catching up. I think, you look at our budgets, we've cut way back on the military. We have a military that needs help. We have a military that the equipment's old. I have a friend whose son has spent quite a bit of time over in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he said that our weapons aren't as good as the enemy because they take the weapons as we give them to people. We give them to people that we think are fighting for us, a bullet shot in the air and they run, and the enemy takes over the weapons. And he's so disheartened when he sees that they have better weapons than we do, and they're American weapons.
National security is going to be a big issue.
Yeah.
You and Hillary Clinton are both way ahead in delegates now. So let's say it's a general election between the two of you. She was the Secretary of State, nation's chief diplomat.
And did a poor job. Look what happened. Look at Syria. Yeah. Look at the job she did.
You're a businessman and hosted a TV show. How do you win that argument at a time of national security crisis?
I think we'll win it because I think people will see I'm much more competent than she is.
But how do you prove
I think
to
I'm
people?
much smarter than she is. I think I'm much more competent than she is. And I think she's been very weak. And I don't think, I said it before, I don't think she has the strength or the stamina to be a good president.
So if the election is
and the call at 3 o'clock in the morning, I think she's sleeping and I don't think she wakes up.
So if the American people...
And that's been proven. When you look at Hillary with that phony ad that she did, the 3 o'clock in the morning ad, she never woke up. The phone call was made. The ambassador, Benghazi, the call was made many hundreds of times. They were calling and calling. She took Blumenthal's call, but she didn't take the call from the people she was sleeping.
Do you think there's anything she did while she was Secretary of State that you think was good? Or she
Not
was
that I can think of, no. Yeah, she did one thing. She did a lot of traveling. I think she worked hard. She did a lot of traveling. She was always on planes, going back and forth. But she also lied. She said she was attacked, and she came under attack. She was landing someplace, and she was under this vicious attack, and the bullets turned out to be a total fraud. I was called by a friend. He said a terrible thing happened in Brussels. I'm not that surprised. Brussels, I've sort of been saying Brussels is a mess with what's going on. And I turned on the television, and I saw what was going on, and I think it's deplorable.
One of your interviews this morning, you talked about giving the country a pep talk as one of the things you would do. When you talk about these issues, you tend to talk about them in negative ways. You say the terrorists are winning. Some people are already in this country. If you were president...
Well, they are winning. I mean, look, they're shutting down the world, and we don't do anything about it. And we're worried about laws, and we can't waterboard, and yet they're chopping off heads and drowning people in steel cages.
So that's again, I understand that's part of your view, but a pep talk implies optimism. So if you were president speaking to the country right now, what would you say optimistically about winning the war on terror?
I'd be very optimistic, and I'd be very tough on terror. I'd be much tougher than what we are right now. And I'd increase our laws so that I'd expand our laws so that we can do certain things. We're not playing on the same field. They have no laws. They have absolutely no laws. They kill people, and they don't talk about it. They don't worry about the law. We do something that's a little bit harsh, and that particular soldier or general or whoever it may be loses his pension and loses his life. We're not playing by the same rules. They're playing dirty stuff, and we're not playing that way. We can't waterboard anymore. We can't do anything. Now, waterboarding, nothing's nice about it, but they say it's a minimal form. Well, you know what? We have to go much tougher because it's eating up the world now, and a lot of the world is weak, and they're weak and ineffective people. What's happening in Germany is unbelievable. What's happening in a small part even of Sweden is unbelievable. And a lot of people are saying Donald Trump was right. And you know that, and I know that. And I don't want to be right about it. I'd actually rather be wrong about it, but I am right about it.
Senator Cruz came out today and said, that he thought we should have police patrols in Muslim neighborhoods in the United States. I know you said that you thought that was a good idea in an earlier interview today. You were 100% behind it. We had Ryan Crocker on our show, former U.S. ambassador to Iraq and Afghanistan. He said it's the worst idea you can imagine, that it would be exactly what ISIS would want us to do, because it would portray the United States as being indiscriminately prejudiced against Muslims. So how do you respond to Ambassador Crocker's view on that?
I'm okay with it, all right? I'm okay. We have to be vigilant. We have to be careful. Do you know, in New York City, we had the strongest, our police department, which is amazing people. We had the strongest, if you talk about vigilance, we were watching closer than anybody else, and it was an amazing group, and they actually caught people in terms of stopping attacks. Right. And it was ended by a mayor who's grossly incompetent, de Blasio. We have an incompetent mayor of New York City, as you probably have heard. And it was ended. They ended it. For no reason, they ended it. And we should bring it back. We have to be vigilant. We have to look, even if it's at the mosques. And I'm okay with it.
But I think you're not,
there's a problem. John, look, there's a problem.
No, I understand, but I think you're not responding to the substance of the argument. So you're saying Ambassador Crocker is wrong that in the analysis that ISIS would take that as a victory?
I would say he's wrong. I think we have to be much tougher, much smarter, and much more vigilant.
Okay. In your career, which has been obviously very successful, what's an analogy? What's the kind of decision that you've had to make that in your career previously that was the closest thing to the kind of a decision that a president has to make when he decides to send American forces into a conflict?
Well, nobody's made decisions like that. You know, you're talking about lives. You're talking about potentially thousands of lives. But you know, when you don't make decisions, oftentimes you're talking about many more lives. If we're going to be weak and ineffective, which is what we are right now. I mean, as an example, I watched President Obama land in Cuba with nobody to greet him. In particular Castro, but nobody to greet him. I thought that was terrible. I then watched him at a press conference yesterday. It looked like he was a baby. Castro was the boss. I then watched him today sitting at a baseball game in Cuba while body parts are laying all over a place with threats to us and threats to everybody else. And I'm watching him sitting in the sun watching a baseball game. I think it looks so bad. He could have left Cuba. He could have said, you know, this is an emergency. He should be back in Washington, in the White House, where a president should be at a time like this. It looks so bad.
What's the toughest decision you've made in your career?
I've made many tough decisions. I can't name
one that was really tough?
Well, I mean, I do multi-million-dollar deals. I do multi-billion-dollar deals.
That was really tough.
Guaranteeing vast amounts of debt to do very large transactions, which takes courage. And they work out. And if they don't work out, I make them work out. I've taken deals that frankly shouldn't have worked out, and I've made them very good deals. Wasn't pretty, but I've made them very good deals. I mean, I'll be building a massive building in a horrible, and the market's great, and then the market turns bad. And I'm very tough on banks, I'm very tough on and I make them turn out. And I do that very often, because very often things don't work out the way you think they're going to work out. And that's the sign of a great business person. It's the sign of a great deal maker, because things change. And it's how do you do in the bad times, not how do you do it. The good times are easy. It's how do you do in the bad times.
You've talked at length about dealing with the border, dealing with ISIS. These are all relatively short-term issues. If you were president 4 years, 8 years, again, going back to this notion of being optimistic, you've talked about the Muslim world being at war with the West. What is the Trump plan long-term to try to make the relationship between the Muslim world and the Western world better?
Well, first of all, they have to respect us. They do not respect us at all. And frankly, they don't respect a lot of things that are happening throughout not only our country, but they don't respect other things. I think what Merkel has done to Germany is an outrage. I think the German people, I know German people that are here all the time. You see them here all the time. The people that love, love, love Germany. And people tell me 2 years ago, they were saying it's the greatest country on earth. And now they're going to leave. They're going to leave Germany. I mean, they're literally
how would you make Muslim world like the West better?
Let me just tell you. The first thing you have to do is get them to respect the West and respect us. And if they're not going to respect us, it's never going to work. This has been going on for a long time. You know, I tell the story about General Pershing in 1918, where there were problems where they had radical Islamic terrorism, okay, in the Philippines. And it's a well-known story, and I'm not going to go through the whole process. But they had a huge problem with the terrorism having to do with Islam or having to do with radical Islam. And he was unbelievably harsh. I think you know the story. He was unbelievably harsh. And they didn't have the problem for 28 years.
So one element would be have the people in the Islamic world respect the West more.
I don't think you
it?
can do anything, and I don't think you're going to be successful unless they respect you. And they have no respect for our president, and they have no respect for our country right now.
Let's talk about NATO. You talked about NATO with the Washington Post editorial board and
Right.
suggested maybe the U.S. should have a different role, a smaller role. You didn't say withdraw, as some people said, but a different role, and then NATO might need a different type of mission. There are people who say that America needs to be the leader of NATO, that that's an important role. Do you agree?
Hey,
America should be the
well,
leader of
we're paying
NATO?
a very disproportionate share. We're paying for a lot of NATO. And it's helping them more than it's helping us. Look, I look at Ukraine, and we're always the leader. What about the countries surrounding it? They don't even say anything. We're always fighting. We're the one that wants to go to World War III with Russia over Ukraine. So we're the ones always fighting. We're the ones putting up a lot of the money for NATO, disproportionately, a lot.
Right.
Now, we put up a lot of the money for a lot of countries. You know, we defend South Korea, we defend Saudi Arabia, we defend Japan, we defend Germany.
But
we put up a lot of money, and then people wonder, I wonder why we owe $19 trillion, okay? I mean, we put up a lot of money for a lot of, when you look at our military budget, it's very interesting, and everyone sees it's many, many times higher than the second one. But it's not really for us. It's because we're defending everybody else. We're defending the whole world.
Right. So should America be the leader of NATO or not necessarily?
I think NATO may be obsolete. NATO was set up a long time ago, many, many years ago when things were different. Things are different now. We were a rich nation then. We had nothing but money. We had nothing but power and you know, far more than we have today in a true sense. And I think NATO, you have to really examine NATO. And it doesn't really help us. It's helping other countries. And I don't think those other countries appreciate what we're doing.
So just to be clear, you made two slightly different arguments there. I just want to clarify. One of them is that the U.S. that you might want to see the U.S. pay less money into NATO because
that one definitely.
That's definitely.
That one definitely.
But it's possible that NATO is obsolete
It's possible.
and should be gotten rid of.
I would certainly look at it.
Okay.
And I'd want more help from other people. And the one thing definitely, we're paying too much, okay? As to whether or not it's obsolete, I will make that determination.